Divorced and left alone, she rushes into marrying a total stranger, discovers he's a billionaire. Hello, my beautiful family. Welcome back to another thrilling tale of love, here on our channel. I truly hope this video finds you well, smiling, and wrapped in joy. You know, I've been reflecting on all your incredible comments from our last story. Each word, each reaction, it fills my heart with so much happiness. Reading your thoughts is like receiving little blessings with every line. If our last journey touched you in any way, if it made you smile, brought tears to your eyes, or stirred something deep within, go ahead and drop a big yes in the comments below. Tell me, what moved you? What stayed with you long after the story ended? Your words breathe life into these stories, and I treasure every single one. You know, my dear family, these tales I share with you aren't just videos, pieces of my soul. Every day, I spend 10 to 12 hours crafting these stories with deep love and care, rewriting scenes, fine-tuning emotions, staying up late into the night, because you deserve nothing but the very best. When you like, share, or leave those heartfelt comments, it lights a fire in me. Your words remind me that I'm not just creating content. I'm creating moments. Moments that matter. Moments that stay. Just yesterday, I had one of those magical reminders. While grabbing my usual coffee at a small cafe downtown, I overheard something that made me pause. A group of college young ladies were huddled around a phone, completely glued to one of our stories. Their gasps, their laughter, their wide eyes, it touched me so deeply. I stood there smiling quietly, realizing once again why I do this. Why these stories matter. And why you, yes, you, matter to me. That's why I always love to know where you're watching from. Especially if you're new here. Welcome. You're now part of a family that spans across oceans and continents. So before we dive into today's story, go ahead and drop the name of your country in the comments. Let's celebrate how beautifully connected we are. No matter where you are in the world, whether you're watching from the US, the UK, Canada, Jamaica, India, or anywhere in between, our emotions, they're universal. And now, my beautiful family, let me take you on a journey that will stir your soul and make your heart race. This is the story of Avery Morgan, a woman who stood at the altar beside a man whose last name she had learned only 3 days ago. Her trembling hands betrayed the calm expression she fought to maintain. Standing across from her, Julian Blackwood, with piercing blue eyes and a smile that gave nothing away, hid secrets that would soon unravel everything Avery thought she knew. Just 2 months earlier, Avery had been signing divorce papers after 8 long years of marriage. And today, she was saying, "I do," to a man she barely knew. What she didn't know was that her new husband owned half of Manhattan, held billions in offshore accounts, and entered their marriage with motives far deeper and far darker than love. So get comfortable. Maybe wrap yourself in a blanket, pour a warm drink, and let your heart open wide to this unforgettable tale of love, courage, and destiny. Take a deep breath, because what you're about to hear might just stay with you forever. Let's begin. 8 years earlier, Avery Morgan had been the epitome of a hopeful bride. At 24, she'd walked down the aisle toward Dominic Foster with dreams of building a life together. The daughter of a middle school teacher and a construction worker from a small town in Oregon, Avery had always been practical, cautious, and methodical. Her marriage to Dominic, her college sweetheart, had seemed the natural progression after dating for 5 years. "I never thought I'd be the type to rush into anything," Avery often told her best friend, Lucia. "Dom and I had a 5-year plan for everything: careers, house, kids. We were supposed to be the couple who made it." Their early marriage had been marked by ambition. Avery poured herself into building her interior design business while Dominic climbed the corporate ladder at a marketing firm. They bought a modest home in the suburbs, renovated it together on weekends, and talked about starting a family once they'd reached financial stability. By year 3, the cracks began to show. Dominic's hours grew longer, his attention more divided. Avery found herself alone most evenings, eating dinner by herself and falling asleep before he came home. When they did share space, conversation dwindled to logistical discussions about bills and schedules. "I thought it was just a phase," Avery would later explain. "Every marriage has rough patches. I believed we were strong enough to weather it." The truth revealed itself on their 6th anniversary when Avery surprised Dominic at his office with dinner. The surprise was hers when she found him with his assistant, Melissa, in a position that left no doubt about their relationship. "How long?" Avery had asked, her voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside her. "Almost 2 years," Dominic had admitted, not even attempting to deny it. The divorce proceedings stretched across 18 painful months. Dominic fought for everything: the house they'd renovated together, a portion of her business assets, even the dog they'd adopted as newlyweds. His attorney was ruthless, painting Avery as negligent of the marriage, too focused on her career. The irony was bitter. When the dust settled, Avery found herself in a 1-bedroom apartment across town, her business struggling after months of distraction and emotional turmoil. Her client list had dwindled, her savings depleted by legal fees. At 32, she was starting over with nothing but a broken heart and shattered confidence. The worst part wasn't losing the house or the money, Avery confided to Lucia over wine one night. "It's looking in the mirror and seeing a fool. I gave 8 years to someone who could throw it all away and never look back." Dominic had moved on swiftly, not just professionally but personally. 6 months after their divorce was finalized, he announced his engagement to Melissa on social media. The photos showed them in Paris, champagne glasses raised against the backdrop of the Eiffel Tower. Avery had blocked him immediately, but not before the images burned themselves into her memory. The isolation crept in slowly. Friends from their shared social circle drifted away, uncomfortable with choosing sides or simply busy with their own growing families. Avery's parents, though supportive, lived 3 states away and couldn't offer more than weekly phone calls and occasional visits. Work became Avery's refuge, but even that proved challenging. Her confidence in her design choices wavered. Client meetings that once energized her now left her drained. She found herself second-guessing every decision, both professional and personal. "I keep wondering what I missed," she told her therapist during one session. "Were there signs I ignored? Am I just fundamentally bad at reading people?" Sleep eluded her most nights. She'd lie awake cataloging her mistakes, replaying conversations from years earlier, looking for clues she might have missed. When exhaustion finally claimed her, her dreams were filled with empty houses, locked doors, and endless searching for something just out of reach. The loneliness was most acute on Sundays. Those had been their days, lazy mornings with coffee and crosswords, afternoon walks with the dog, meal prep for the week ahead. Now Sundays stretched before her like deserts, vast and empty. Lucia tried to pull her from her isolation. "You need to get back out there," she insisted. "Not necessarily dating, just living. Meeting new people. Remembering who you are outside of what happened." Reluctantly, Avery agreed to attend a gallery opening with Lucia, her first social event in months. She wore a black dress she'd almost donated during her move, a reminder of her former life that now hung loosely on her frame. "You look beautiful," Lucia assured her. "Stop fidgeting. I feel like everyone can see 'divorced and damaged' stamped on my forehead," Avery whispered as they entered the crowded gallery. "No one's thinking that," Lucia said firmly. "They're thinking that woman in the elegant black dress has amazing cheekbones and probably interesting things to say." The evening had been a disaster. Avery overheard a mutual acquaintance discussing Dominic and Melissa's upcoming wedding. The bathroom became her refuge, tears threatening to ruin her carefully applied makeup. "I can't do this," she texted Lucia. "Going home." That night, staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, something inside Avery shifted. The woman looking back at her, hollow-eyed, pale, diminished, was unrecognizable. This wasn't who she was. This wasn't who she wanted to be. "Enough," she whispered to her reflection. "Enough hiding. Enough hurting. Enough letting him win." The next morning, Avery called a former client who'd been trying to convince her to take on a project in Aspen. It would require her to relocate temporarily, to leave behind a city filled with memories of her failed marriage. "I'll do it," she told the surprised client. "I can be there next week." As she packed up her apartment and prepared for the temporary move, Avery felt something she hadn't experienced in months: possibility. The mountain air, the change of scenery, the challenge of a new project. Perhaps this was exactly what she needed to reclaim herself. What she couldn't know was that this decision, this attempt to escape her past, would lead her directly into a future more complicated and unexpected than anything she could have imagined. A future that included a chance encounter with a mysterious stranger who would offer her an unusual proposition, one that her broken, vulnerable heart wouldn't be able to refuse. Aspen in February was transformed by snow and wealth. Avery arrived during peak season, when the small town swelled with visitors seeking pristine slopes and exclusive nightlife. Her client, Rebecca Winters, had purchased a mountain lodge that needed complete renovation, a 6-month project with an aggressive timeline and generous budget. The previous owner left it stuck in the 1980s, Rebecca explained during their first walkthrough. "I want something modern but warm. Something that honors the mountains without all the usual clichés." For the first time in months, Avery felt her creative energy returning. The space was magnificent: soaring ceilings, walls of windows framing mountain views, and potential hidden beneath dated finishes. She threw herself into the work, spending long days measuring, sketching, and sourcing materials. Her temporary housing was a small apartment above a local bookstore, cozy but isolated. Evenings stretched out with little to fill them beyond work. After 3 weeks of take-out dinners eaten alone at her drafting table, Avery decided to venture out. The Black Diamond was an upscale restaurant popular with visitors and locals alike. Avery had made a reservation for one, ignoring the hostess's pitying glance as she was led to a corner table. "Just the appetizer menu, please," she told the server. "And a glass of the Cabernet." She was halfway through her wine when the commotion started near the entrance. A group of boisterous men were being seated at the restaurant's best table, clearly important guests based on the manager's deferential behavior. Avery tried not to stare, but one man caught her attention. Tall with broad shoulders, he stood slightly apart from the others, observing rather than participating in their animated conversation. His dark hair was flecked with silver at the temples, and even from across the room, there was an intensity to him that commanded attention. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up, meeting her eyes directly. Avery quickly glanced down at her menu, embarrassed to be caught watching. When she dared look up again, he was still observing her, his expression unreadable. Her meal arrived, offering a welcome distraction. She had just taken her first bite when a shadow fell across her table. "Excuse me," a deep voice said. "Would you mind some company?" The man from across the room stood beside her table, a glass of whiskey in hand. Up close, Avery noticed his eyes, a striking blue that bordered on gray, like winter ice. I'm sorry," Avery stammered, caught off guard. "Julian Blackwood," he said, extending his free hand. "And you look far too interesting to be dining alone." Against her better judgment, Avery gestured to the empty chair across from her. "Avery Morgan. And what makes you think I'm interesting? We've never met." "Anyone who orders the chef's experimental appetizer without asking questions has my attention," Julian replied, nodding toward her plate. "Most people stick to familiar territory." "Maybe I didn't read the menu carefully," Avery challenged. A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Did you?" "No," she admitted. "I didn't. Life's too short for safe choices." "A recent philosophy?" he asked, his perception uncomfortably accurate. Avery studied him, trying to decide how much to reveal. "Let's just say I'm rewriting my approach to life." Their conversation flowed with surprising ease. Julian asked thoughtful questions about her design work, listening intently to her answers. He revealed little about himself beyond that he was in town for business, something involving investment opportunities. "My colleagues are discussing a potential acquisition," he explained, gesturing toward the rowdy table he'd abandoned. "I find I'm more interested in hearing about color palettes and spatial flow." 2 hours passed before Avery realized how late it had grown. The restaurant had emptied around them, servers hovering with barely concealed impatience. "I should go," she said, reaching for her wallet. "Please allow me," Julian insisted, already signaling for the check. Outside, snow had begun to fall, large flakes drifting down to settle on Julian's dark coat and Avery's hair. "May I walk you home?" he asked. Avery hesitated. "That's probably not necessary." "Probably not," he agreed. "But I'd like to, if you're comfortable with it." The walk through town was magical, snow muffling their footsteps, holiday lights still twinkling in shop windows, the mountains looming dark against the night sky. They walked slowly, continuing their conversation until they reached her building. "This is me," Avery said, pointing to the side entrance next to the bookstore. Julian nodded, studying the modest building. "I've enjoyed meeting you, Avery Morgan." Likewise, Julian Blackwood. He took her hand, his touch warm despite the cold night. Would you have dinner with me tomorrow? A proper dinner date this time, not a table invasion. Every cautious instinct Avery had developed over the painful past year screamed at her to decline. Yet something about Julian, his quiet confidence, his attentiveness, the way he'd made her laugh for the first time in months, made her nod. "Yes," she said simply. "I'd like that." What she couldn't know was that this dinner would lead to another, and 7 whirlwind days that would culminate in a decision so impulsive, so contrary to her nature, that it would alter the course of her life forever. Their first official date unfolded at a private dining room in the St. Regis Hotel. Avery arrived to find a table set with candles, fresh flowers, and a bottle of vintage champagne already waiting. "This is excessive," she said, taking in the opulent setting. Julian smiled, pulling out her chair. "I prefer the term thoughtful. Tell me, when was the last time someone went to excessive lengths for you?" The question hit a nerve Avery hadn't expected. "It's been a while," she admitted. Over 7 courses prepared by the hotel's executive chef, they delved deeper into conversation. Julian listened intently as Avery described her passion for design, the satisfaction of transforming spaces, and even her struggle to rebuild after her divorce. In turn, he shared stories of his travels: Paris in autumn, Tokyo during cherry blossom season, remote islands in Greece where time seemed suspended. "What about family?" Avery asked as dessert arrived. "You haven't mentioned them." A shadow crossed Julian's expression. "My parents died when I was in college. Car accident. No siblings. Extended family exists, but we're not close." His tone was matter-of-fact, but Avery recognized the practiced neutrality of discussing old wounds. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "It was a long time ago." He refilled their champagne glasses. "What about yours?" "Mom and Dad are still in Oregon. Simple people with extraordinary hearts. I have an older brother who lives in Seattle with his wife and kids." "You're close." Avery nodded. "We are, though the divorce has made everything complicated. They want to help, but they don't really understand what I'm going through." Julian reached across the table, taking her hand. "It can be lonely when no one truly sees your pain." Those words, so simple yet so precise, broke something open in Avery. Someone finally understood. Their second date involved a private helicopter tour of the mountains, followed by dinner at a remote lodge accessible only by air. Their third, a midnight snowshoeing adventure under a full moon. Each experience was magical, dreamlike, and far removed from Avery's carefully structured existence. On their 4th night together, in front of a roaring fire in his suite, Julian asked about her marriage. What went wrong? Beyond the obvious infidelity. Avery sipped her wine, considering. We stopped seeing each other. Really seeing each other. We built a life that looked perfect from the outside, but inside, I think we were both lonely. That doesn't excuse what he did, but I understand it better now. And what would you do differently? Julian asked, his eyes intent on hers. I'd be braver, she said without hesitation. I'd speak up about what I needed instead of assuming he should know. I'd take more risks, push us out of our comfort zones." She laughed softly. "I spent 8 years planning every detail of our life together, and in the end, none of it mattered." Julian was quiet for a long moment. "Do you ever think some people are meant to find each other at precisely the right moment? When both are ready to receive what the other has to offer?" On their 5th night together, Julian took her to the mountaintop restaurant where they'd first met. As snow fell outside the windows, he pulled a small box from his pocket. "This isn't what you think," he said, placing it before her. "Open it." Inside was a key, not a ring. "My family has a home on a private island in the Mediterranean," Julian explained. "I go there when I need to reset, to remember who I am beyond my work. I'd like to take you there." Avery stared at the key. "Julian, we've known each other less than a week. And yet I feel I've known you always," he said, his voice low and certain. "Time is arbitrary, Avery. Some people spend decades together without truly connecting. Others need only moments." "I can't just leave," she protested. "I have the project, commitments." 2 weeks, he countered. "The renovation can wait that long. When was the last time you did something completely spontaneous?" The answer was never. Even her move to Aspen had been carefully planned. "I need to think about this," she said. Later that night, in his arms, she gave him her answer. Yes. Their 6th day together was spent making arrangements. Julian handled everything efficiently, changing flights, contacting her client, ensuring her work would be covered during her absence. On the morning of their 7th day together, over breakfast in his suite, Julian set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. "I have a proposition," he said, his tone suddenly serious. "One that might seem crazy." Avery's heart quickened. "More crazy than whisking me off to a private island after knowing me a week." "Marry me," he said simply. "Today. Before we leave." Avery's coffee cup clattered against its saucer. "What?" "I know how it sounds," Julian continued. "But I also know what I feel. What I think we both feel. This connection between us, it's rare. Extraordinary. Julian, I just got divorced. I barely know you. You know what matters," he insisted. "You know how I make you feel. How we are together. People don't do this," she whispered. "Not rational people. Maybe that's the problem with the world. Too much rationality, not enough courage to seize happiness when it appears." He took her hands in his. "I'm not asking for forever, Avery. I'm asking for a chance. If it doesn't work, we part ways, no regrets. And if it does work, then we'll have an amazing story to tell." 6 hours later, they stood in a small chapel in downtown Aspen. Avery wore a simple white dress purchased that morning, Julian a charcoal suit. The only witnesses were the officiant, his wife, and a photographer Julian had somehow arranged on short notice. As she spoke her vows, a voice in the back of Avery's mind screamed that this was madness. She ignored it. For once in her life, she would follow her heart instead of her head. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant declared. Outside the chapel, snow began to fall again as Julian kissed her. "Mrs. Blackwood," he murmured against her lips. I'm keeping my name, she reminded him, laughing. Of course you are, he said with a smile. I wouldn't have it any other way. The private jet taxied down the runway as Avery gazed out the window, her new wedding band catching the sunlight. Beside her, Julian worked on his laptop, occasionally making calls in hushed tones that she couldn't quite decipher. "Julian," she said after his third cryptic conversation ended, "your plane has a bedroom." He glanced up, eyebrows raised. "Among other amenities. You never mentioned owning a private jet." Julian closed his laptop. "You never asked about my transportation preferences." His smile was playful, but something in his eyes seemed guarded. "Does it bother you?" "It's not bothering me, exactly. It's just surprising." The flight attendant, Avery, was still processing that her new husband employed a full flight staff, approached with champagne. "Mrs. Blackwood, would you prefer the Dom Perignon or the Krug?" "Either is fine," Avery replied, still uncomfortable with both the title and the casual reference to champagne that cost more than her monthly rent. As they soared over the Atlantic, reality began pressing in. She'd married a man she'd known for 7 days. A man who, she was realizing, had significant resources he'd downplayed during their whirlwind romance. "What exactly do you do, Julian?" she asked as night fell outside the jet's windows. "You mentioned investments, but that covers a lot of territory." "I acquire companies," he said simply. "Restructure them, make them profitable, sometimes sell them. Occasionally, I hold on to the ones with particular promise. And that's lucrative." His laugh was warm. "It can be, yes. Does my financial situation concern you?" "I'm not concerned about the money," she clarified. "I'm concerned about how little I know about the man I just married." Julian took her hand, kissing her palm. "Fair point. What would you like to know?" "Everything. Start with where we're going." "My family's island is called Niziros. It's small, about 3 square miles, in the Aegean Sea. The main house was built by my grandfather in the 1950s. "Your family owns an entire island?" Avery's voice rose despite her efforts to remain composed. "Technically, I do now. It passed to me after my parents died." Dawn was breaking when they landed at a private airstrip in Greece, transferring immediately to a sleek yacht that cut through turquoise waters. Avery stood at the railing, watching as an island emerged from the morning mist. White buildings cascaded down a hillside, a stark contrast against the azure sea. "It's beautiful," she whispered as Julian joined her. "Wait until you see the house." The house turned out to be a sprawling villa perched on the highest point of the island, surrounded by olive groves and flowering gardens. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the sea from every room, and multiple terraces provided panoramic views of the surrounding islands. A staff of 12 greeted them upon arrival, a household manager, cook, housekeepers, gardeners, and security personnel who maintained a discreet but constant presence. "They live in the village," Julian explained as they were shown to the master suite. "Most have worked for my family for generations." That evening, after an exquisite dinner served on the main terrace, Avery wandered through the villa while Julian took a business call. Each room revealed new surprises, original artwork by masters she recognized from museum exhibitions, ancient artifacts displayed as casually as family photos, a library filled with first editions and rare manuscripts. In what appeared to be Julian's office, she found herself drawn to a wall of framed photographs. Most showed Julian in various locations around the world, shaking hands with political figures she recognized, standing alongside celebrities at charity events, receiving awards at formal galas. One photo in particular caught her attention. Julian, looking younger, standing beside an older man with the same striking blue eyes. Behind them loomed the distinctive skyline of Manhattan. "That's my father," Julian said from the doorway, startling her. "At the opening of the Blackwood Tower in New York." "I didn't mean to snoop," Avery said quickly. "You're my wife. Nothing in this house is off limits to you." He crossed the room to join her. "That was taken about a year before the accident." "The Blackwood Tower," Avery repeated. "I've seen it in the skyline. That massive glass building on Park Avenue." "Corporate headquarters," Julian confirmed. "Though we own several properties throughout the city." Avery turned to him, suddenly connecting dots she'd been too love-struck to notice before. "Julian, how wealthy are you, exactly?" His expression remained neutral. "Would the number change how you feel about me?" "No," she said honestly. "But I'd like to know who I married." He sighed, leading her to a leather sofa in the corner of the office. The Blackwood Group is one of the largest privately held investment firms in the world. I have interests in real estate, technology, shipping, healthcare, among other sectors. And that translates to... Forbes estimated my net worth at just under $11 billion last year. His tone was matter-of-fact, as if discussing the weather. Avery felt the room tilt slightly. "Billion. With a B. Yes. And you never thought to mention this?" "I found that particular detail tends to change how people interact with me," Julian said, his expression guarded. "I wanted you to know me, not my bank accounts." Before Avery could respond, Julian's phone rang. He checked the screen, frowning. "I need to take this. Financial crisis in Hong Kong." He kissed her forehead. "We'll continue this conversation later." Later never came. Julian spent hours on the phone, emerging well past midnight to find Avery asleep. The pattern repeated over the following days, idyllic mornings together, followed by Julian disappearing for hours of mysterious business. On their 5th day on the island, Avery was swimming in the infinity pool when she noticed a helicopter approaching. It landed on a pad she hadn't realized existed on the property's eastern edge. 2 men in suits disembarked, greeted by Julian, who had materialized from somewhere within the villa. The 3 disappeared inside for hours. When they emerged, Julian escorted them back to the helicopter, shaking hands formally before returning to the villa. From her vantage point, Avery noted the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his mouth that hadn't been there before. That night, awakening to find the bed empty beside her, Avery wandered through the darkened villa. She found Julian in his office, illuminated only by the glow of multiple computer screens. "Julian!" He looked up, quickly minimizing several windows on his monitors. "You should be sleeping. So should you. It's 3 in the morning." Business doesn't adhere to convenient hours, I'm afraid." Avery approached his desk, noticing the documents scattered across it: financial statements, contracts, and what appeared to be architectural renderings of an enormous complex. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "You seem preoccupied." Julian gathered the papers quickly. "Just a delicate acquisition. Nothing for you to worry about." "I'm your wife," she reminded him, echoing his earlier words. "Shouldn't I know what's keeping you up at night?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Some aspects of my business are complicated, Avery. Confidential. I prefer to keep them separate from our personal life." As she returned to bed alone, Avery couldn't shake the feeling that her impulsive marriage had landed her in waters far deeper than she'd anticipated. Her new husband was not just wealthy. He was powerful in ways she was just beginning to comprehend. And he was keeping secrets. Their second week on the island brought more questions than answers. Julian's mysterious business calls increased, often pulling him away from their planned activities. Twice more, helicopters arrived with stern-faced visitors who departed hours later without ever being introduced to Avery. "I thought this was supposed to be our honeymoon," she commented one evening as Julian returned from yet another private meeting. "I apologize," he said, loosening his tie. "An unexpected situation requires my attention. It should be resolved soon." "You've said that every day this week." Julian approached her, cupping her face in his hands. "2 more days. Give me 2 more days to handle this, and then you'll have my undivided attention." The next morning, Avery woke to an empty bed and a note on Julian's pillow: "Emergency in London. Taking the jet. Back tonight. Explore the island. The car and driver are at your disposal." Irritation flared. She'd married a man she barely knew, and now he was leaving her alone on his private island while he jetted off to handle mysterious emergencies. After breakfast, restlessness drove her to explore the villa more thoroughly. Most doors were unlocked: guest rooms, storage areas, wine cellars, but one remained firmly secured, a room adjacent to Julian's office. "Excuse me," she asked Elena, the housekeeper who'd been tidying nearby. "What's in that room?" Elena's expression tightened. "Mr. Blackwood's private study, ma'am. Only he has access." "I see. And do you know when it's cleaned?" "Mr. Blackwood handles that room personally, ma'am." "A locked room that even the staff couldn't enter?" Avery's curiosity intensified. That afternoon, she was swimming when she noticed a small, unobtrusive building about 100 yards from the main villa. Constructed of the same white stone, it blended perfectly with the landscape. She might never have noticed it if not for a staff member entering with a tray of food. Wrapping herself in a towel, Avery made her way toward the structure. As she approached, she heard voices, Julian's unmistakable baritone among them. He was back from London already? The door opened suddenly, and Julian emerged with a woman Avery had never seen before, tall, elegant, with silver-streaked dark hair. They were deep in conversation, heads close together, the woman's hand resting familiarly on Julian's arm. "Julian!" Avery called out before she could stop herself. He turned, surprise flashing across his face before his features settled into a neutral expression. "Avery! I was about to come find you." I thought you were in London." "Change of plans," he said smoothly. "Avery, this is Valentina Rostova, an associate." "Valentina, my wife, Avery." The woman assessed Avery with cool interest. "A pleasure. Julian has told me so little about you." "Funny, he's never mentioned you at all," Avery replied, tightening her towel around herself, acutely aware of her wet hair and bare feet. "Val was just leaving," Julian interjected. "The helicopter is waiting." With a meaningful look at Julian and a perfunctory nod to Avery, Valentina walked toward the helipad. Julian turned to Avery, his expression unreadable. "Let's talk inside," he said quietly. "Who is she?" Avery demanded once they reached the privacy of their suite. "As I said, a business associate. We've worked together for years." "On what, exactly?" "Various projects. Acquisitions, mostly." Julian's phone chimed, and he checked it with obvious relief. "I need to make a call. We'll discuss this later." But later, Julian was inexplicably absent again. Frustrated and increasingly suspicious, Avery found herself outside his private study. On impulse, she tried the handle. Still locked. She leaned against the wall, noticing for the first time a keypad partially hidden behind a decorative vase. A security system, not a traditional lock. Her gaze shifted to Julian's office across the hall, remembering the way he'd minimized windows when she'd entered unexpectedly. An idea formed. Julian's laptop was likely password protected, but what if? In his office, she found his desk clear except for a framed photo, the one of Julian with his father that she'd noticed earlier. Studying it more carefully now, she realized it had been taken at the opening of the Blackwood Tower. The date might be significant. On a hunch, she returned to the keypad outside the locked room and entered the year from the photograph. Nothing. She tried the exact date next. The light remained red. What else would Julian use? His parents' death date? Too morbid. His birthday? Too obvious. Her gaze returned to the photograph, noticing a detail she'd missed, a small plaque visible in the background with numbers. The address of the Blackwood Tower? Worth a try. The keypad flashed green, and the door clicked open. Avery hesitated, her heart pounding. This was an invasion of privacy, crossing a line in her days-old marriage. But Julian's secretive behavior, the locked room, the mysterious woman. She pushed the door open. The room was smaller than expected, its walls covered with monitors displaying various data streams, stock tickers, news feeds, security camera footage from locations around the world. A large desk dominated the center, its surface covered with documents organized in neat stacks. One monitor showed a satellite view of what appeared to be construction sites, massive projects on multiple continents. Another displayed what looked like personnel files, faces and credentials scrolling in a continuous feed. On the desk sat a leather portfolio embossed with a Blackwood Group logo. Avery opened it to find documents detailing the acquisition of a technology firm, a transaction valued at over $4 billion, scheduled to close the following week. Attached was a memo regarding Project Phoenix, referencing security concerns and potential opposition from several governments. The language was vague but concerning, with phrases like containment of information and neutralizing resistance. Behind the desk, a glass cabinet contained rows of passports, all with Julian's photo but different names and nationalities. Beside them sat multiple phones, stacks of currency from various countries, and several handguns. "I see you found your way in." Avery whirled to find Julian standing in the doorway, his expression calm but his eyes cold in a way she'd never seen before. "What is all this?" she demanded, gesturing to the surveillance monitors, the passports, the weapons. "Who are you really?" Julian closed the door behind him, leaning against it. "I'm exactly who I said I am. Julian Blackwood, CEO of the Blackwood Group. And the rest of it? The fake passports, the guns, neutralizing resistance. That sounds like something from a spy novel, not a business strategy." He crossed to the cabinet, closing it firmly. "The business world at my level isn't conducted like your interior design projects, Avery. International acquisitions worth billions involve complex security considerations." "And Valentina? What's her role in all this?" "Head of Security Operations. Former intelligence. She ensures our more sensitive ventures proceed smoothly." Avery felt her world tilting. "Are you telling me you're some kind of corporate spy?" "I'm telling you that protecting multi-billion-dollar assets sometimes requires measures that wouldn't be covered in business school." His voice softened slightly. "Avery, everything I've built, everything my father and grandfather built before me, exists in a world few people understand. There are competitors who would do anything to access what's in this room." "So you lied to me." "I omitted certain details until I could be sure of your discretion." He gestured to the room around them. "Your presence here rather proves my caution was warranted." "We're married," Avery reminded him, anger rising. "Or was that just another strategic acquisition?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Before Julian could respond, an alarm sounded from one of the monitors. His attention snapped to a screen showing security camera footage of the villa's perimeter, where two boats were approaching the private dock at high speed. "Damn it," he muttered, reaching for one of the phones in the cabinet. "Val, we have incoming. Full protocol." He turned to Avery, his expression grave. "We need to leave. Now." "What's happening?" "The people in those boats aren't here for a social call." He took her arm, guiding her firmly toward the door. "I'll explain everything, I promise. But right now, we need to get to the helicopter." "Do you think Avery was right to investigate her husband's secrets? Would you stay with someone who kept such massive parts of their life hidden from you? What would you do if you discovered your new spouse wasn't who they claimed to be?" Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you're enjoying this roller coaster romance, hit that like button and subscribe before we begin. The helicopter blades whirred to life as Julian practically carried Avery across the villa's grounds. Behind them, security personnel moved with practiced precision, some taking defensive positions, others rushing toward the incoming boats. "Who are those people?" Avery shouted over the noise as Julian helped her into the helicopter. "Competitors," he replied tersely, sliding in beside her and signaling to the pilot. "Hostile ones." The helicopter lifted off just as men in black tactical gear poured onto the dock. Through the window, Avery glimpsed someone raising what looked like a weapon toward them. "Get down!" Julian yanked her below the window line as something pinged off the helicopter's exterior. "They're shooting at us." Avery's voice pitched with panic. "Reinforced glass," Julian assured her, though his expression remained grim. "We're safe." As the island receded behind them, Avery's initial fear gave way to fury. "Start talking. Now." Julian sighed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "The Blackwood Group isn't just an investment firm. We specialize in acquiring technologies with strategic implications." Strategic? Like weapons. Like innovations that could reshape global power dynamics. Artificial intelligence, biotechnology, quantum computing. Things governments and military contractors would pay billions to control. "So you're what, an arms dealer?" Julian frowned. "We're gatekeepers. We acquire these technologies to ensure they don't fall into dangerous hands." "Those men with guns seemed pretty dangerous to me." "They work for Viktor Kozlov, Russian oligarch with connections to several intelligence agencies. He's been after one of our recent acquisitions, a quantum encryption technology that could render current cybersecurity methods obsolete." The helicopter banked sharply toward the mainland. Through her window, Avery could see Athens in the distance. "Where are we going?" "Safe house in Athens first, then a private airfield. We need to get back to New York." "New York? What about my things? My job in Aspen?" Julian fixed her with a steady gaze. "Avery, those men would have killed us both without hesitation. Your luggage isn't the priority right now." Reality crashed down on her. The magnitude of what she'd stumbled into, the danger that had suddenly become very real. This wasn't a movie or a novel. This was her life now. "I didn't sign up for this," she whispered. Julian's expression softened marginally. "No, you didn't. And I'm sorry. Sorry you married me. Or sorry you got caught lying." "I never lied about how I felt about you," he said quietly. "Everything between us was real." "Was it? Or was I just convenient?" A horrible thought struck her. The renovation project in Aspen, was that even a coincidence? Did you arrange it somehow? Set up our meeting? Julian's silence was damning. "Oh my God," Avery breathed. "You did, didn't you? This whole thing was planned." "Not exactly," Julian finally said. "I knew you'd be in Aspen. I knew about your divorce, your career. When certain business interests required a presence in Aspen, I suggested the Black Diamond, knowing you frequented it. You researched me before we met. It wasn't a question. Standard procedure for anyone who enters my orbit." "Standard procedure," Avery repeated, the words bitter on her tongue. "Did you engineer the divorce too? Pay Dominic to cheat on me so I'd be vulnerable when you swooped in?" "Of course not." Julian looked genuinely offended. "I'm not a monster, Avery." "Then what am I to you? A mark? A cover? Some kind of corporate asset?" Before he could answer, the pilot's voice came through the headsets they wore. "Sir, we have a tail. 2 o'clock, gaining." Julian cursed under his breath, checking the radar display. Kozlov's men. Can you lose them? Working on it, sir. The helicopter banked again, sharper this time, descending rapidly toward a dense section of coastal forest. Avery clutched her seat as her stomach lurched. There's a clearing 2 kilometers ahead, the pilot reported. I can set down there. Ground transport is standing by. Minutes later, they were racing through the trees toward a waiting SUV, the sound of another helicopter growing louder behind them. Julian pushed Avery into the vehicle's back seat before sliding in beside her. 2 men Avery had never seen before occupied the front seats, more of Julian's security team, she presumed. As they sped away, Avery noticed Julian typing rapidly on his phone. "What now?" "Contingency plans," he replied without looking up. "We have protocols for situations like this." "You have protocols for fleeing armed men with your brand-new wife?" Despite everything, a hysterical laugh bubbled up. "How often does that happen?" Julian glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "The wife part is new." The SUV wound through narrow mountain roads, eventually merging onto a highway toward Athens. Julian remained glued to his phone, occasionally making calls in languages Avery didn't recognize. She stared out the window, trying to process how her life had transformed so completely in just 2 weeks. "Why me?" she finally asked, breaking a long silence. "Of all the women you could have pursued, married, brought into this dangerous world of yours, why choose an interior designer from Oregon?" Julian set down his phone, giving her his full attention for the first time since their escape. "You're resilient. Your divorce would have broken many people, but you rebuilt. You're observant, detail-oriented, quick-thinking. And you have no connections to my world, which made you perfect." "Perfect for what?" "The Blackwood Group has enemies, Avery. Powerful ones. 4 years, I've lived with security teams, restricted movement, constant vigilance. It's effective but limiting, especially when conducting sensitive negotiations. And a wife provides. What? A better cover story. Legitimacy. Access to circles where security details raise eyebrows. No one looks twice at a billionaire traveling with his new bride." His gaze held hers. "I needed someone I could trust, someone strong enough to handle the truth once it was revealed." "You say that like you planned to tell me eventually." "I did. After we returned to New York. I had everything prepared, security briefings, legal documents, the full disclosure. The attack forced my hand." Avery shook her head in disbelief. "You honestly expected me to just accept all this? To smile and play the billionaire's wife while you conduct your dangerous acquisitions?" "I expected you to make an informed choice," Julian corrected. "With appropriate compensation, of course." Compensation. The word hung between them. So this was a business transaction after all. Not entirely. Something flickered in Julian's eyes. Vulnerability, perhaps, or regret. "My interest in you was genuine, Avery. The connection we formed was real. But yes, there were strategic considerations as well. And if I want out, if I decide this isn't the life I want." Julian was quiet for a long moment. "That would be unfortunate. but not insurmountable. The SUV pulled into an underground garage beneath a nondescript office building in downtown Athens. As the driver cut the engine, Julian turned to Avery. "We'll be safe here temporarily. You have questions, and you deserve answers. But first, I need to ensure our security team at the island is safe." He reached for her hand, which she withdrew. "Whatever you decide, Avery, I promise you this: I will protect you." As Julian exited the vehicle, phone already at his ear, Avery remained seated, a cold realization washing over her. In her haste to escape her painful past, she had married a man who dealt in secrets and danger, a man who had calculated her value to his business interests even as he claimed to have fallen in love with her. And now, she was caught in a web of international intrigue with no clear way out. The safe house occupied the entire top floor of the office building, a luxurious apartment with sweeping views of Athens and the Acropolis in the distance. Under different circumstances, Avery might have appreciated the stunning interior design, with its perfect blend of modern furnishings and classical Greek elements. Instead, she paced the spacious living room while Julian conferred with his security team in an adjacent study. From the fragments of conversation she could overhear, the situation at the island had been contained, though not without casualties. When Julian finally emerged, he'd changed into fresh clothes and looked more composed, though exhaustion shadowed his eyes. "The island is secure," he announced. "2 of Kozlov's men were killed. One of our security team was injured but will recover. People died because of whatever you're involved in," Avery said quietly. "And you're talking about it like a minor inconvenience." Julian poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter. "Would you prefer I pretend to be shocked? This is the reality of the world I operate in, Avery. Powerful interests, dangerous stakes. No normal person lives like this. I've never claimed to be normal." He gestured to the space around them. "None of this is normal. But it is real." Avery sank onto a sofa, suddenly overwhelmed. "I don't even know who you are." "That's not true." Julian sat across from her, leaning forward intently. "You know the essential parts of me. My values, my character, how I treat people I care about. The details of my business dealings don't change who I am at my core." "Those details include fake identities and armed attackers," Avery countered. "That changes everything." "Does it?" Julian challenged. "When you first met me, what drew you in? Was it my resume? Or was it something more fundamental?" The question struck deeper than Avery wanted to admit. What had attracted her to Julian wasn't his job or status. It was his presence, his attention, the way he seemed to understand her without explanation. "I fell for a mirage," she finally said. "A carefully constructed facade." "No." Julian's voice was firm. "You fell for me. The real me. The business complexities, the security measures, those are circumstances, not character." A knock at the door interrupted them. Valentina entered, looking considerably more battle-ready than when Avery had seen her on the island. She wore tactical gear now, a sleek firearm holstered at her hip. "The jet is ready," she informed Julian. "Security perimeter is established. We can move in 20 minutes." Julian nodded. "Thank you, Val." As Valentina turned to leave, Avery called out, "Wait." The woman paused, eyebrow raised. "Are you and Julian?" Avery left the question hanging. Valentina's lips curved in a small, amused smile. "Professional colleagues for 15 years. Nothing more." Her gaze shifted to Julian, though not for lack of opportunity. After she departed, Julian sighed. "Valentina is an exceptionally talented security specialist. Our relationship has always been strictly professional. But she wanted more. She understood long ago it wasn't an option." Julian moved to sit beside Avery. "I've never misled you about my feelings, Avery. Whatever else you may doubt, please don't doubt that." His proximity, the familiar scent of his cologne, the earnestness in his eyes, it all tugged at Avery's resolve. Part of her wanted to believe him completely, to fall back into the fantasy of their whirlwind romance. But the practical part of her, the part that had rebuilt her life after devastating betrayal, held firm. "Even if I believe you genuinely care for me," she said, "that doesn't change the fact that you orchestrated our meeting, researched me in advance, and married me partly for strategic business purposes." "I won't deny there were multiple factors in my interest," Julian admitted. "But is that so different from conventional relationships? People choose partners based on compatibility, shared goals, mutual benefit. I simply evaluated those factors more comprehensively." "You make marriage sound like a merger." "In many ways, isn't it? Two separate entities joining forces, combining resources, working toward common objectives." He took her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. "The difference is the emotional component, the connection that transcends practical considerations." Avery studied their intertwined fingers. "And you feel that? This emotional component?" "More powerfully than I expected," Julian said softly. "Much more. It's complicated my plans considerably." "What plans?" Julian hesitated before responding. "The original arrangement I envisioned was more temporary. A marriage of convenience that would serve its purpose for perhaps a year or two. And then what? Divorce. A generous settlement to keep me quiet." "Something like that," he acknowledged. "But that was before. Before you actually got to know me and developed genuine feelings?" Avery supplied, unable to keep bitterness from her tone. "Yes." His honesty was disarming. "I didn't expect to care for you as deeply as I do. It's inconvenient, frankly." Despite everything, a laugh escaped her. "Only you would describe falling in love as inconvenient." "It complicates security protocols," Julian said with the ghost of a smile. "Creates vulnerability. Introduces variables that can't be controlled." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "And yet, I wouldn't change it." The tenderness of the gesture weakened her defenses. For a moment, they sat in silence, the weight of revelations and choices hanging between them. Finally, Avery spoke. "I need time, Julian. Space to process everything. To decide if this, whatever this is something I can live with." "Time we have," he agreed. "Space is more complicated at the moment, given the security situation." "What exactly does Kozlov want? Why attack us?" Julian's expression darkened. 2 weeks ago, we acquired a small tech firm in Finland that had developed a revolutionary encryption algorithm. Kozlov wanted it for his government contacts. When he couldn't buy it legitimately, he resorted to other methods. So those men were trying to... what? Kidnap you for information. Most likely. Or eliminate me to disrupt our operations long enough for them to make another play for the technology. The casual way he discussed potential assassination chilled Avery. And now we return to New York, where security is more robust. Once there, you'll have options. Julian's gaze was steady, including walking away, if that's what you choose. Just like that. After everything you've told me, you'd let me leave. With proper arrangements for your continuing safety, yes. His expression was solemn. I won't keep you prisoner in a life you don't want, Avery. That was never my intention. Another knock at the door signaled their time was up. Julian stood, offering his hand to help her rise. We need to go. The jet is waiting. His eyes searched hers. Will you come with me to New York? Give yourself time to make an informed decision about our future. Avery looked at his outstretched hand, weighing her options. Return to Aspen and her interrupted life? That path seemed impossible now, contaminated by danger and deception. Or continue forward with Julian, into a world of wealth, power, and peril she'd never imagined. Taking a deep breath, she placed her hand in his. I'll come to New York. But I'm not promising anything beyond that. Relief washed over Julian's features. That's all I ask. A chance to show you the truth. All of it. Then you decide. As they moved toward the door, Avery couldn't shake the feeling that regardless of her decision, her old life was gone forever. She had crossed a threshold into Julian's world, and nothing would ever be the same again. What would you choose if you were in Avery's position? Would you walk away from a relationship built partially on deception, or give it another chance when genuine feelings have developed? Have you ever had to decide whether to stay with someone after discovering they weren't exactly who you thought they were? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you're invested in Avery and Julian's journey, hit that like button and subscribe to Love and Twilights for the next installment in their story. 3 months after their hasty departure from Greece, Avery stood on the balcony of Julian's, now their Manhattan penthouse, watching early autumn paint Central Park in russet and gold. The transition from impulsive bride to billionaire's wife had been anything but smooth, but she'd finally reached a decision that felt true to herself. The first weeks in New York had been a blur of security briefings, legal discussions, and emotional confrontations. Julian had kept his word, providing Avery with her own secure apartment while she processed everything. Each day brought new revelations about the Blackwood Group's operations, some troubling, others surprisingly noble. The encryption technology we protected from Kozlov? Julian had explained during one of their lengthy discussions. It's being implemented in communication systems for human rights activists in authoritarian regimes. If it had fallen into Kozlov's hands, it would have been weaponized against those same people. Gradually, the complete picture of Julian's world emerged. Yes, he moved in morally ambiguous circles, making deals with powerful interests across the globe. But unlike many of his counterparts, Julian operated with a strict ethical framework, refusing acquisitions that could cause humanitarian harm, regardless of the profit potential. "Everything okay?" Julian's voice pulled her from her thoughts as he joined her on the balcony, 2 coffee mugs in hand. These quiet morning moments had become a ritual during their reconciliation process. "Just reflecting," Avery replied, accepting the mug. "It's been quite a journey. Having regrets." His tone was casual, but she caught the flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. "About staying?" "No." She turned to face him fully. "About how we started. That's more complicated." The Kozlov situation had been neutralized through diplomatic and business channels. Julian never shared the full details, but the immediate threat had passed, allowing them to establish a new normal, one built on honesty rather than convenience. Avery had ultimately chosen to embrace this unexpected life, but with conditions. The foundation had been her idea, a philanthropic arm of the Blackwood Group focused on educational access and technological literacy in underserved communities. As its director, she channeled both her design expertise and newfound understanding of Julian's world into creating something meaningful. The Vietnam project received final approval, Julian mentioned, referencing their newest initiative, a series of technology education centers in rural communities. "Your design modifications impressed the board." "They should." "I spent 2 weeks talking with local teachers about what would actually work in their environments." This was the arrangement they'd negotiated, her full integration into Julian's business world, but with autonomy and purpose beyond being merely his wife. Her interior design career had been reimagined rather than abandoned. With Julian's connections but her own talent, Avery had established a boutique firm specializing in sustainable luxury design. Her reputation in the field had grown rapidly, bringing clients who valued her work rather than her marital connection. "The gallery called about your installation," Julian reminded her. "They need final approval on the lighting design." Avery nodded. Her upcoming exhibition, featuring sustainable interior concepts for urban microliving, represented another step in reclaiming her professional identity within this new context. "I'll handle it this afternoon," she promised, leaning against the balcony railing. "After my meeting with the security team." That had been another non-negotiable element of their reconciliation, her complete briefing on security protocols and involvement in relevant decisions. No more being kept in the dark, for her protection. If this was to be her life, she would face it clear-eyed. Julian set down his coffee mug and turned her gently toward him. "Happy anniversary." 1 month ago, they had held a small, private ceremony, a renewal of vows that represented their conscious choice to build a life together, with full awareness of what that entailed. This time, Avery had walked into marriage with complete understanding rather than impulsive escape. "I have something for you," Julian said, producing a small box from his pocket. Inside wasn't jewelry, as might be expected, but a key. "What's this for?" "The room adjacent to my study. I've had it converted." Julian's expression was earnest. "It's yours, a secure space for your project files, design work, foundation planning. Equal to mine in every way." The gesture touched her deeply. It wasn't about the physical space but the symbolic dismantling of the secretive, compartmentalized approach that had characterized the beginning of their relationship. "Thank you," she said simply, understanding the true gift being offered, trust equality, transparency. Later that evening, as they prepared for a foundation gala, Avery caught sight of their reflection in the bedroom mirror. Herself in an elegant but understated gown, Julian in his impeccable tuxedo. They looked like any power couple in Manhattan's elite circles, but she knew the complex reality behind the polished image. "Having second thoughts?" Julian asked, noticing her contemplative expression as he adjusted his cufflinks. "Not second thoughts," she clarified. "Just appreciation for how far we've come. 1 year ago, I was drowning in divorce papers and isolation. Now I'm here, in this life I never imagined. Regrets?" The question held genuine concern. Avery considered this carefully. "I regret the deception at the beginning. I regret not knowing what I was walking into." She met his gaze in the mirror. "But I don't regret where we've landed." Their relationship had evolved into something neither had anticipated. More challenging than Julian's original strategic arrangement, more fulfilling than Avery's initial escape from loneliness. They had created something authentic from artificial beginnings. As they moved toward the elevator, Julian took her hand. The Milan acquisition might require travel next week. The sustainable building materials company we discussed. "I'll come with you," Avery decided immediately. "After Milan, I thought we might visit that coastal village you mentioned. The one where your grandmother lived." Julian's surprised smile confirmed she'd made the right suggestion. These glimpses into his closely guarded personal history were still rare, each one a victory of intimacy over isolation. In the elevator descending to their waiting car, Avery reflected on the strange path that had led her here. The impulsive decision to marry a stranger had thrust her into a world of wealth, power, and danger, but also purpose, partnership, and unexpected love. Through the deception and revelation, the danger and security, she had found not just a husband but herself, stronger and more capable than she'd ever imagined. The woman who had fled to Aspen seeking escape from her painful past had instead found a future she never could have envisioned. Complicated, sometimes frightening, but ultimately hers by choice. Would you take a risk on love after being hurt before? Have you ever discovered unexpected strength when faced with difficult choices? What would you do if someone's deception ultimately led to something genuine? Share your thoughts in the comments. For more unforgettable love stories that explore the complexities of modern